Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So, let's begin. My name is Victor. After many years of marriage and life together, I reached into my wife's bag and pulled out a bottle of men's lubricant. She wasn't expecting what I did next, and neither was I, because once the truth stepped into the light, it didn't blink. That evening didn't seem different from any other, except my phone charger decided to die at the one moment I actually needed it. The connector had been glitching for weeks. That night, it gave up completely. I'd already ordered a replacement on Amazon, but it wasn't coming until tomorrow, and my phone sat stubbornly at 12%, just enough to be annoying. Lately, my wife had been coming home later, and later. Her reasoning always looped back to work extra hours, last-minute projects, emergencies that somehow only arrived near sunset. I never pressed. Back then, I was the kind of husband who believed what he was told. I didn't second-guess the gradual shifts. I assumed the best, because the worst possibilities were too heavy even to name. I still remember the first unusual late night. It was about 3 months before everything unraveled. She came in around 9:30, apologizing like she meant it, explaining a last-minute client meeting that went long. I heated her dinner, asked about her day, and filed it away as nothing. That, I'd later realize, was my first mistake, not because kindness is wrong, but because sometimes it's how you miss the obvious. The late nights multiplied, first once a week, then twice, then more nights late than on time. Every time there was a reason that sounded plausible enough. Looming deadlines, demanding clients, team meetings that couldn't be moved. I didn't question whether any of it was true. I just nodded and waited out the calendar. Other changes crept in. She became protective of her phone, taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She started showering the moment she got home, saying she felt grimy after long days at the office. During conversations, she drifted eyes flicking down at her phone mid-sentence. Our physical intimacy shrank to a shadow of what it had been. When I mentioned it carefully, she blamed stress and promised it would get better once this project or that cycle ended. I believed her because I wanted to, and because believing was easier than imagining the alternative. That night, she came through the door late, which had become routine. She said, "Hello," without looking at my face, and walked straight to our bedroom. From the couch, I heard the bathroom door close and the shower start. This had become her ritual home, minimal small talk, then hot water running long enough to fog the mirrors twice. Back then, I told myself it was her way to decompress. 20 to 30 minutes felt excessive, but not impossible. Now I know she was washing away what I didn't want to imagine. With my battery sinking and the need for a charger real, I went to her bag. We'd always shared things. Her charger was the same model as mine. Borrowing it felt harmless, almost thoughtless. I unzipped the bag and sifted through the usual keys, makeup purse, a pair of glasses, folders, and my hand closed around something that didn't belong, a bottle of men's lubricant. Right beside it sat a morning-after pill. I stood there holding them, trying to assemble explanations faster than my heart was beating. The lube was about half-empty recent use, regular use. The morning-after pill pack looked unopened at first glance. These weren't the sort of items someone carried by accident. They had a story attached, and that story had nothing to do with late meetings. I put them back exactly as they were and stepped away, the floor suddenly feeling uncertain under my feet. My mind sprinted through every possibility. Maybe they were a leftover from a health awareness event, maybe a weird office prank, maybe not hers. But even as I tried those on, I knew I was grasping. The evidence was straightforward, only my denial was complicated. When she rejoined me later, I asked about her day. Words came out of her, like she'd practiced them. Meetings, deadlines, rough clients. When I asked follow-ups, simple, neutral ones, her answers turned vague and slippery. She mentioned a presentation for a difficult client. I asked what industry they were in. Her reply was generic. She claimed she stayed late to strategize with a colleague. I asked what they decided. She couldn't say. I studied her face, She looked anywhere but into my eyes. Her fingers worried her phone. Notifications buzzed every few minutes, each time she glanced down with a look I couldn't translate into honesty. We spent the evening together, but I couldn't have told you what show was on or what jokes were told. My mind kept returning to the bottle I'd touched, to the blister pack with pills. Who was she using it with? How long? Was it someone from work or someone new? The morning after pill told an uglier truth. This wasn't careful. This was unprotected and reckless. Health risks weren't just hers. She was choosing to risk both our bodies while smiling through the evening like it was any other Wednesday. Around 11, she said she was tired and went to bed. She kissed me on the forehead before leaving the room, a gesture that suddenly felt like a parody. I listened to drawers open and close. I stared at the ceiling and wondered how a lie could move through a house so easily without knocking anything over. Later, when she slept, I went back to the bag. I needed to be certain of what I'd seen. I examined the morning after pack properly this time. 2 doses originally. Now 1 slot was empty. 1 pill was gone. The empty space spoke louder than anything she'd said that night. This wasn't an abstract fear. It was current, living, happening right under my roof. I sat in the dark of our bedroom, the evidence in my hand, and felt something more than my heartbreak. My faith in the person I'd chosen, my belief in the ground we'd built on, my confidence that I could read the faces of people I loved, all of it cracked. It wasn't just the physical act, it was the months of lying. Every time she walked in late with a polished story, she'd met my eyes and bent the truth until it fit in her pocket. Every time I'd worried and offered to bring dinner to her office, she'd let me play the fool. An idea formed that was as ugly as what I felt. If she was using that lubricant with another man, there was a way to make truth undeniable. I took the bottle to the garage, grabbed my toolbox, and emptied it. Then I refilled it with superglue. I returned it to her bag in the exact place and orientation I'd found it. The consistency was marginally different, but not enough to notice unless you were looking for a difference. A part of me told me this was wrong, that I should confront her, or call a lawyer, or walk out. Another part, the part that was bruised and humiliated, wanted proof that couldn't be spun. I wanted an end to the theater. Then I waited. On the surface, the next several days looked ordinary. She went to work. She came home at reasonable times. We moved through routines like our house was on a turntable. I watched closely to see if she noticed anything off. In the meantime, I analyzed everything. When she kissed me goodbye, I wondered who she was thinking about. When she recapped her day, I tried to weigh truth against cover. Her phone buzzed at odd hours, late nights, early mornings, and she always checked immediately, never offering a name or a context. The waiting hollowed me out. I felt like an actor in a life I didn't believe in. Meals tasted like a script. Sleep came wrong. When it did come, it didn't stay. I stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m. and asked the dumb questions. Was she cheating on our anniversary? On vacation? The night she said she loved me last week. The result arrived on a Friday. She stayed out later than usual. Late enough that the clock pushed past patience into something else. When I finally called, she answered and said she was in the hospital. I didn't ask why over the phone. I took my keys and left. The call was brief, the tone wrong. She gave me a hospital name and a room number. No explanation. Her voice was tight, strained in a way that didn't sound like a sprained ankle. The drive felt like 2 drives. One that belonged to a husband, concerned for his wife, and one that belonged to a man who had set a trap and knew exactly what his destination meant. In the emergency ward, I gave her name, showed ID, and was directed down bright corridors that smelled of antiseptic and urgency. A strange mixture of anxiety and grim certainty settled on me. If I was right, and I was almost sure I was, this would be the kind of proof that couldn't be dodged. The cost of that proof, I realized, might be much higher than a broken trust. I stepped into her room. Machines, lines, monitors. She looked pale and upset, and, most of all, exposed. Like the lights were too bright for the story she'd been telling. Our eyes met. Recognition happened in the first half-second. I saw guilt, too, and something else. The knowledge that I knew, and the knowledge that she knew I knew. There was no confusion, no plausible story waiting. I looked at her and said one word: cheat. I didn't wait for explanations or pleas. I turned around and left. The confrontation, if you could call it that, lasted less than 2 minutes. But that was the moment years of marriage ended without ceremony. Driving home, the emotions tumbled and contradicted. Relief that the fog was over. A heavy awareness that what I'd done had probably caused real harm. The surreal sense that I was watching another man's life go to pieces. I forced myself to consider the implications. Superglue and moisture. Bond fast. Chemical burns and tissue damage are real. ER staff would have had to move quickly and carefully to prevent permanent injury. What I did uncovered the truth. It didn't justify risking someone's body. Even wounded, I could see that. Even betrayed, I could admit it. Back home, I didn't have language for any of it. The life on our walls, the photos from trips, the framed smiles, looked less like memories and more like evidence of a person I'd invented. The divorce began as soon as she was discharged. We didn't speak. Lawyers did. Her attorney filed a claim for assault immediately. The case was unusual and messy. Her side argued I'd deliberately harmed her. My lawyer presented evidence of her adultery and awkwardly framed my act as a prank, though the word felt wrong in my mouth even when it served my case. I hadn't known for certain she was cheating until the hospital. I had suspected, acted, and learned the most brutal way. We both worked and earned, which made division straightforward and cold. No children meant none of that worst part of divorce. The house was sold, proceeds split. Retirement accounts, investments, and savings divided down the middle. We'd built a decent pile. We dismantled it by the book. It took months, cost too much, and drained what the hospital hadn't already emptied. We lived apart, spoke through documents, and signed away a decade in increments. That's how I went from married to unmarried, because of a dead charger. A broken cable set off a chain that ended a marriage in weeks. Trust takes years to build. It can be undone by what looks like a small thing. If that $15 charger had flickered one more night, I might not have opened her bag. I might have slept beside a lie for months or years. I might have never known. The absurdity of it doesn't make it less true. Looking back, there were better choices I didn't make. I could have confronted her directly the night I found the bottle. I could have collected more evidence and filed cleanly. I could have demanded counseling to ask why and when it started. Instead, I chose a route that forced truth into the open, while risking harm I can't take back. The experience taught me uglier lessons than I wanted. Betrayal drags out the worst in decent people, and I wasn't immune. Hurt and anger are poor navigators. Vengeance feels satisfying until you see the bill. I'm rebuilding now, learning to trust without being blind, to ask questions without being paranoid, to listen to instincts without turning into a detective in every room. It's slow. It's work. But it's possible. Sometimes, late, I still wonder about the forked path. If the charger had lived one more day, if I hadn't searched the bag, if she had ended the affair quietly and returned to our routine, if I would have kept loving a person who wasn't there. Those questions have no answers that help. What I know is this: truth, however brutal, is better than living in a fabricated peace. Even if the way I found that truth was wrong, I'm grateful I learned who I was married to before I lost more years. Deception's damage isn't limited to the day it's discovered. It echoes into every attempt at future trust. If you're the betrayed, that reality is heavy. If you're the betrayer, that damage is bigger than what you think you're managing. Trust is fragile and expensive. Once broken, it rarely returns to its original shape. My marriage ended, but my life didn't. I'm trying to build something better out of what's left. using what I learned about love, about honesty, about what people do at their lowest, and about who I am when I'm hurt. It cost me too much to forget it. I won't.